Melania Trump surprise visit to a school. Teachers can't believe what happens next. Jenny Wilson woke up that Monday morning with the same feeling she'd had for the past 12 years of teaching. A mix of exhaustion and determination. Her ancient alarm clock blinked 5:30 a.m., and she could already hear the garbage trucks rumbling outside her apartment window. "Another day in paradise," she muttered, shuffling to her tiny kitchen. The coffee maker, a Christmas gift from her fellow teachers, gurgled to life. Her cat, Mr. Whiskers, wound between her legs, demanding breakfast. "Yes, yes, Your Majesty. Heaven forbid you starve for 2 minutes." She smiled, despite herself, pouring kibble into his bowl. The morning ritual continued. Shower, makeup, professional clothes that had seen better days. Jenny caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. At 42, she wasn't getting any younger, but her eyes still held that spark. The one that made her choose teaching over her father's suggestion of law school. The drive to Lincoln Elementary was the same as always. Past Joe's Diner, where she sometimes grabbed lunch. Past the shuttered factory that used to employ half the town. Past the new strip mall that nobody really wanted but got built anyway. The school parking lot was starting to fill up when she arrived at 7:15. Her spot, unofficially reserved by years of habit, waited for her near the side entrance. As she gathered her bags, teacher life meant always carrying enough materials to stock a small office. She spotted Sarah Martinez pulling in. "Jenny, hold up," Sarah called out, juggling her own collection of bags and what looked like a science project. "Did you see the email about the staff meeting?" "There's a staff meeting?" Jenny groaned. "Please tell me it's not another curriculum review." Sarah laughed, falling into step beside her. "Worse. Budget discussions? Again. Like they're going to magically find money we don't have." They badged into the building. The familiar school smell. A mixture of floor cleaner, cafeteria breakfast, and children's hopes and dreams, welcoming them home. The hallways were still quiet, but not for long. In an hour, they'd be filled with the controlled chaos of elementary school life. The teacher's lounge was its usual morning self. Bob Thompson, the gym teacher, was doing his crossword puzzle. Maria Sanchez, who taught ESL, was heating up what smelled like amazing leftovers for lunch. Principal Davidson's secretary, Linda, was updating the ancient coffee maker with fresh filters. "Morning, everyone," Jenny called out, claiming her usual spot at the worn table. "Linda, you're a saint." "Someone's got to keep you caffeine addicts functioning," Linda replied with a wink. "Though I swear this machine's older than some of our students." "Speaking of old," Bob chimed in without looking up from his puzzle. "Anyone know a 7-letter word for outdated?" "Ancient." Several voices chorused together, followed by laughter. Jenny pulled out her lesson plans for the day. Her third graders were starting a unit on state history, and she'd spent the weekend preparing interactive activities. Sarah peeked over her shoulder. "Ooh, the Gold Rush lesson? That's always a hit. If I can keep Tommy Anderson from eating the fool's gold again," Jenny sighed. "I swear, that kid would try to eat anything that sparkles." Maria joined them, the smell of her lunch making everyone jealous. "At least he's enthusiastic. Yesterday, my second period, couldn't even muster the energy to mispronounce vocabulary wrong." The morning continued its normal rhythm. Teachers drifted in and out, sharing complaints about paperwork, swapping stories about students, planning the week ahead. Outside the lounge, the hallways gradually filled with life as students began arriving. Jenny was about to head to her classroom when Diane from the front office burst in, her eyes wide. "You guys won't believe this. There's some kind of security team in the parking lot. Like serious-looking guys in suits, with earpieces." Bob finally looked up from his crossword. "FBI? Did someone finally report the mystery meet in the cafeteria?" Linda shook her head. "No, this is different. I just saw 3 black SUVs pull up. They look official, like government official." "Maybe it's a drill?" Sarah suggested, but she sounded uncertain. Jenny walked to the lounge window, which overlooked the main parking lot. Sure enough, men in dark suits were establishing a perimeter, speaking urgently into their wrists. More vehicles were arriving. "This can't be good," she murmured. "Should we be worried?" Before anyone could answer, Principal Davidson burst through the door. His tie was askew, and his usually composed face was flushed bright red. "Everyone, stay calm," he said, which immediately made everyone less calm. "But we have a situation." "Frank, what's going on?" Linda demanded, using the principal's first name, something she only did in emergencies. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. I just got a call. From the Secret Service. He paused, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was about to say. Melania Trump is coming. Here, now. The room erupted in chaos. What? The former First Lady? Why here? Now, like right now? Jenny's mind raced. Their school wasn't anything special, just a regular public elementary school in a struggling town. They hadn't won any awards recently. They weren't doing anything newsworthy. Why would Melania Trump choose them? Frank, Maria spoke up, her voice tight with concern. We have several undocumented families. If this is some kind of… No, Principal Davidson interrupted. They assured me this isn't that kind of visit, but they wouldn't tell me much else. Sarah checked her phone. There's nothing on the news, no announcements, this can't be real. But through the window, Jenny could see more Secret Service agents arriving. They were speaking with the school security guard, showing credentials. It's real, she said softly. But why? Her words were cut off by the sight of another vehicle pulling up, longer and sleeker than the others. The teachers crowded around the window, professional dignity forgotten in their curiosity. Holy shit, Bob whispered, abandoning his crossword entirely. That's her. Melania Trump stepped out of the vehicle, and Jenny felt her breath catch. The former First Lady was dressed impeccably in white, her presence immediately commanding attention. But something was off. Even from a distance, Jenny could tell something wasn't right. Look at her face, Sarah murmured. Has she been crying? Before anyone could respond, Principal Davidson's walkie-talkie crackled to life. Sir, they're requesting to enter through the main entrance. Should we initiate lockdown protocols? The principal looked around the room, meeting each teacher's eyes. Well, folks, I guess we're about to have a very interesting day. Linda, please announce a soft lockdown. Keep the students in their classrooms, but don't alarm anyone. Everyone else, try to act normal. Jenny gathered her things, her mind spinning. As she headed to her classroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. She just didn't know how yet. The hallway seemed different now, charged with anticipation. Through her classroom window, she could see more media vans starting to arrive, though how they'd found out so quickly was anyone's guess. Her students were already filing in, oblivious to the commotion outside. Tommy Anderson was indeed eyeing the fool's gold samples on her desk with suspicious interest. Good morning, class, she said, her teacher voice steady despite her racing heart. Let's start with our morning routine, shall we? As her students began their daily journal writing, Jenny couldn't help but glance out the window again. Melania Trump was still standing by her vehicle, clutching something. Was that a Target bag? The former First Lady's shoulders were tense, her posture uncertain. Whatever was about to happen, Jenny had a feeling this wouldn't be any ordinary Monday at Lincoln Elementary. The next 15 minutes were surreal. Jenny tried to focus on her lesson, but her eyes kept drifting to the window. Secret Service agents were now positioned at every entrance, their earpieces gleaming in the morning sun. Miss Wilson? Emma Martinez raised her hand. Why are there men in black suits outside? Before Jenny could formulate a response, the classroom phone rang. She picked it up, grateful for the interruption. Jenny? It was Linda from the office. They're coming down the main hallway now. Keep your kids calm, okay? Right, thanks. Jenny hung up and took a deep breath. Class, we're going to have a special visitor today. I need everyone to stay in their seats and… Miss Wilson? Tommy Anderson was practically bouncing. Is it the president? No, Tommy, it's… Is it Santa? Little Amy Chen piped up hopefully. In October? Jackson Roberts scoffed. That's stupid. Hey now, Jenny intervened. We don't use that word in our classroom. And… No, it's not Santa. Let's just focus on our work. And… The sound of heels clicking on linoleum silenced everything. Jenny could hear voices in the hallway, getting closer. Principal Davidson's nervous laugh. Another voice, accented and soft. Her students sat transfixed, 23 pairs of eyes fixed on the classroom door. Through the narrow window, Jenny caught glimpses. Dark suits, a flash of white fabric, more suits. Then Principal Davidson appeared in the doorway, his tie somehow even more crooked than before. Miss Wilson? His voice cracked slightly. Do you have a moment? Jenny nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "Class, please continue with your journal writing. I'll be right back." She stepped into the hallway and found herself face to face with Melania Trump. Up close, the signs of distress were even more apparent. The former First Lady's makeup was flawless, but her eyes were rimmed with red. She clutched that brown bag like a lifeline. "Mrs. Trump," Jenny managed. "Welcome to Lincoln Elementary." Melania's smile was tight, almost pained. "Thank you. I hope I'm not disrupting your class." "No, not at all. We're just—" A commotion from inside the classroom interrupted her. Tommy Anderson had apparently decided that this was the perfect moment to sample the fool's gold after all. "Tommy!" Jenny rushed back in, teacher instincts taking over. "Spit that out right now." To her mortification, she heard a sound she never expected. Melania Trump laughing. Not the polite, diplomatic laugh she'd shown on television, but a real, genuine laugh. The former First Lady had followed her into the classroom and was watching the scene with what looked like delight. Tommy, face red, deposited the fool's gold into the trash can. The other students sat in stunned silence, staring at their unexpected visitor. "I had a boy like this in my son's class," Melania said, her accent thick with amusement. "Always tasting things, even the class hamster's food." The tension in the room broke. Students giggled. Even the Secret Service agents at the door cracked slight smiles. Principal Davidson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Trump, we should continue the tour." "Number," Melania's voice was firm. "I would like to stay here for a moment, if Miss Wilson doesn't mind. These children, they are honest. Real." She paused, something flickering across her face. "I need real today." Jenny nodded, still trying to process what was happening. "Of course. We were just about to start our state history lesson. Would you like to?" "Yes." Melania surprised everyone by pulling up an empty chair. She set her brown bag carefully beside her, one hand still resting protectively on it. "Please, teach." And so Jenny Wilson found herself giving perhaps the strangest lesson of her career. She taught about the state's gold rush while the former First Lady of the United States sat among her third graders, asking questions and smiling at their enthusiasm. Secret Service agents stood guard at the door, stone-faced but occasionally betraying interest in the history lesson. But Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was brewing. Every few minutes, Melania's hand would drift to that brown bag. Her smile would fade, replaced by something heavier, more urgent. Whatever had brought her to Lincoln Elementary, it wasn't a simple school visit. The bell for first period break rang, making everyone jump. Principal Davidson stepped forward again. "Mrs. Trump, we should really continue." "Yes." Melania stood, smoothing her dress. "But first, I need to speak with your teachers. All of them. It's important." Her voice caught on the last word. Jenny felt a chill run down her spine. The real story was about to begin. The teacher's lounge at Lincoln Elementary had never felt smaller. Jenny Wilson sat squeezed between Sarah Martinez and Bob Thompson, both radiating nervous energy. Around the room, other teachers found spots wherever they could, on spare chairs, desk edges, even a few sitting cross-legged on the floor. Principal Davidson had helped arrange a makeshift circle, pushing aside the usual lunch tables. "Is this everyone?" Melania Trump stood by the window, still clutching that brown bag. Outside, news vans were starting to gather. Someone had tipped off the media. Linda poked her head in. "Just waiting on Maria Sanchez. She's getting her ESL class settled with a substitute." Jenny noticed Melania's slight reaction to the words ESL class, a tightening around her eyes, a shift in her posture. The former First Lady's perfectly manicured fingers drummed against the bag's worn fabric. The door opened again, and Maria hurried in, slightly out of breath. Sorry. My students were a bit excited about everything." "Whose aren't?" Sarah chuckled nervously. Tommy Anderson tried to eat fool's gold in Jenny's class. A few teachers laughed, but the sound died quickly. The room felt charged, like the air before a storm. Principal Davidson cleared his throat. "Mrs. Trump, now that we're all here—" "Please," she interrupted softly. "Just Melania." She moved to the center of the room, then seemed to hesitate. For a moment, she looked lost. A strange sight for someone usually so composed. "I don't know how to begin this," she admitted. her accent thicker than it had been in the classroom. "I have practiced in my head, many times, but now—" Jenny noticed Maria Sanchez leaning forward slightly, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. As an immigrant herself, Maria had always been particularly interested in Melania's story. "Take your time," Linda offered kindly. "We've got the kids covered." Melania nodded, then reached into the brown bag. Jenny expected her to pull out a prepared speech, maybe some kind of official announcement. Instead, what emerged was a bundle of papers held together with rubber bands. They looked worn, as if they'd been handled many times. "These," Melania's voice wavered, "these are letters. I kept them, all of them, even when they told me not to." She untied the bundle with trembling fingers. Papers spilled onto the small table in front of her, some on official White House stationery, others on notebook paper, even a few on what looked like paper towels. "This one," she held up a crumpled sheet, "is from a girl named Rosa. She was 12. She wrote to me from a detention center." Melania's composure cracked slightly. "She asked why we took her brother away. She said she still loved America, even after everything, even after." Her voice broke. The perfect facade, the one the world had seen for years, began to crumble. Maria stood up suddenly. "I know Rosa." The room went silent. "What?" Melania's head snapped up. "Rosa Mendez," Maria continued, her own voice shaking. "She's in my ESL class now. She got reunited with her family last year. Her brother—" "Miguel," Melania whispered. "He was 8. He's 10 now," Maria said. "He has nightmares still." Something changed in Melania's face. The last traces of her public mask vanished. Tears began rolling down her cheeks, smearing her perfect makeup. "I tried," she said, her words coming faster now. "Behind the scenes, I tried. But they said I had to be quiet, be pretty, be perfect." She grabbed another letter. "This one is from a mother who nursed other women's babies in the detention center because their mothers, their real mothers, were somewhere else, somewhere in the system. Bob Thompson, the tough gym teacher who never showed emotion, had to look away. Sarah was openly crying. And this," Melania pulled out a stack bound with a faded ribbon. "These are from the children, so many children. They drew pictures, asked questions, begged for help." Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped several pages. Jenny and others moved to help gather them. "Oh my God," Jenny breathed, looking at one of the drawings. It showed stick figures separated by what looked like cage bars. The words, "I miss my mommy," were written in wobbly children's handwriting. "I kept them all," Melania continued, her voice growing stronger despite her tears. "Every letter, every drawing, every cry for help. They told me to throw them away. Said it was protocol. Said it wasn't my concern." She laughed bitterly. "Not my concern? I was an immigrant, am an immigrant. These could have been my children." Principal Davidson shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Melania, why are you showing us this now?" She turned to him, and her expression made him step back. "Because I can't be quiet anymore. Because these stories need to be told. Because—" She gestured around the room. "You are teachers. You see children every day. You know their hearts. You know when they're hurting." Linda spoke up, her usual efficient manner softened by emotion. "But why our school? Why today?" Melania sat down heavily in a nearby chair. "You have children from 27 different countries in this school. I checked. You have ESL programs, support services, teachers who care." She looked at Maria. "Teachers who understand." Maria nodded, tears streaming down her face. "My family crossed the border when I was 9. The fear never really goes away." "No," Melania agreed softly. "It doesn't." Jenny found herself looking at more letters. Some were in English, others in Spanish, a few in languages she couldn't identify. All of them carried the same weight of desperation, of hope, of loss. "There's something else," Melania said, reaching deeper into the bag. "Something I wasn't supposed to keep. Something that could." She paused, glancing at the door where Secret Service agents stood watch. Sarah leaned forward. "What is it?" Before Melania could answer, Linda's walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Miss Parker, we have a situation developing outside. Multiple vehicles approaching, news vans and others." Principal Davidson rushed to the window. Oh no. Jenny joined him and felt her heart sink. The crowd gathering outside was growing rapidly. She could see news cameras, but also people with signs starting to emerge from cars. How had they found out so quickly? Someone must have posted on social media, Bob guessed, joining them at the window. Melania stood, clutching another envelope she'd just retrieved from the bag. This is my fault. I should have known they would find out. They always do. Who's they? Jenny asked, but she had a feeling she knew the answer. Everyone, Melania replied simply. Those who want to use me, those who want to silence me, those who think they own my story. She straightened her shoulders, though her cheeks were still wet with tears. But today, this story belongs to the children. And it's time everyone heard it. The crowd outside was growing louder. They could hear chanting starting, though the words weren't clear yet. We should call the police, Principal Davidson said, reaching for his phone. No, Melania's voice was firm. First, you all need to see this. She held up the envelope. Because once I show this to the world, everything will change. And I need people who understand children, who care about truth, to see it first. Jenny looked at her fellow teachers' faces, all showing different mixtures of fear, curiosity, and determination. Whatever was in that envelope, whatever storm was brewing outside, they were all part of it now. Maria stepped forward, placing a hand on Melania's arm. We're listening. The former First Lady took a deep breath and opened the envelope. The paper inside looked official, stamped with government seals. As she began to read it aloud, Jenny realized why Melania had chosen their school, chosen this moment, chosen them. This wasn't just about telling a story. This was about changing one. These are internal memos, Melania began, her voice barely above a whisper. From the Department of Homeland Security, they knew where every child was, every parent. They had a system. Her hands trembled as she held the papers. They chose not to reunite them. A collective gasp filled the room. Maria's hands flew to her mouth. There's more, Melania continued. Emails, orders, names of officials who… She stopped, composing herself. Who saw children as nothing but political tools. Sarah stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need a minute. She walked to the corner, wiping her eyes. Bob followed, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Jenny found her voice. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Melania's laugh was hollow. You think I didn't try? There were consequences, threats, not just to me. She gestured to the window, where the Secret Service agents stood vigilant. Even now, they think they're protecting me. But really, they're watching me. Principal Davidson ran his hands through what remained of his hair. This is bigger than us. We're just a small school in… No. Melania cut him off sharply. Not just a school. You are teachers. You shape minds, hearts. When those children were in cages, you know what they asked for most after their parents? She pulled out another letter. Teachers. They asked for teachers, to read to them, to help them learn English, to just be there. Linda, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Those news vans outside. You planned this, didn't you? Melania nodded slowly. Not here, specifically. I've been carrying these papers, these letters for months. Looking for the right moment, the right place. She looked around the room. When I read about your school, about your programs for immigrant children, your ESL success rates, I knew. The noise outside was getting louder. They could hear distinct chants now, some supporting Trump, others protesting. They're going to try to stop you, Jenny said quietly. Both sides. You know that, right? Let them try. For the first time, Melania smiled. A real smile, fierce and determined. I've been silent too long. Playing a role, the perfect wife, the quiet immigrant who got lucky. She stood straighter. No more. Maria walked to the window, watching the growing crowd. My students are going to be scared. All this noise, all these people. Then we protect them, Bob said firmly, surprising everyone. The gym teacher's usual gruff demeanor had been replaced by something stronger. Whatever's about to happen, we keep our kids safe. Principal Davidson's phone buzzed. He checked it and paled. Local news is already running the story. Social media's blowing up. We've got calls coming in from national networks. Good. Melania began gathering the letters, carefully returning them to her bag. But first, she pulled out one final document. This is a list. Names, dates, locations, every child, every parent. She took a deep breath. Every officer who followed those orders, every official who signed them. The room went completely silent. "They'll come for you," Linda whispered. "They already are." Melania nodded toward the window. The crowd had doubled in size. Signs were appearing, both for and against her. The chants were getting angrier. Jenny felt a chill run down her spine as she watched black SUVs pulling into the parking lot, different from the Secret Service vehicles. Men in suits emerged, their demeanor distinctly less protective and more threatening. Department of Homeland Security. Melania identified them without even looking. Right on schedule. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, rejoining the group. Melania straightened her designer dress, now wrinkled from sitting on old teacher's lounge furniture, and squared her shoulders. "You do nothing. This is my fight. She looked around the room, meeting each teacher's eyes. "I needed witnesses, people who would understand why. People who would remember the truth, no matter what happens next." "Like hell we'll do nothing," Bob growled. Several teachers nodded in agreement. Principal Davidson's walkie-talkie crackled again. "Sir, we have media requesting access to the building, and some official-looking people demanding entrance. Should we initiate lockdown procedures?" The principal looked at Melania, who stood calmly in the center of the room, her brown bag now filled with enough evidence to shake the foundations of power. "Mrs. Trump," he said formally, "what would you like us to do?" She took a deep breath, years of practiced poise warring with raw determination on her face. "First, we make sure the children are safe. Then," she smiled, and it was nothing like the camera-ready smile they'd seen for years on television. This was the smile of someone ready to tear down walls. "Then we tell the truth. All of it." The teachers of Lincoln Elementary looked at each other, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever was about to happen, they were part of it now. The crowd outside grew louder. The black SUVs crept closer. And somewhere in the building, children just like the ones who had written those letters were waiting to learn what would happen next. Jenny checked her phone. Lunch break was almost over. Soon parents would start arriving, drawn by the news and the crowd. The simple school day they'd expected had transformed into something historic. "Well," she said, standing up, "I guess we better get ready for one hell of a parent-teacher conference." The tension broke as teachers laughed, a nervous but determined sound. They began to move with purpose, years of handling school emergencies kicking in. Linda coordinated with security. Sarah and Maria went to check on their most vulnerable students. Bob positioned himself by the main entrance. But Jenny lingered for a moment, watching Melania Trump hold that brown bag like a shield and a sword all at once. The former First Lady caught her eye. "Are you sure about this?" Jenny asked quietly. Melania's answer was interrupted by a loud banging on the teacher's lounge door. A stern voice called out, "Mrs. Trump, this is Agent Carson with DHS. We need to speak with you immediately." The moment of truth had arrived. The hallways of Lincoln Elementary had never felt so long. Jenny Wilson walked beside Melania Trump, their footsteps echoing off the worn linoleum floors. Behind them, Agent Carson from DHS was still demanding attention, his voice growing increasingly frustrated. "Mrs. Trump, you need to understand the severity of this situation," he called out. "Those documents are classified. You're violating multiple federal—" "I understand perfectly," Melania replied without turning around. Her accent was thick now, her carefully practiced American pronunciation abandoned in her anger. "I understood every time you tried to silence me before." Through the windows, Jenny could see the crowd outside had swollen dramatically. Trump supporters waved flags and held signs reading "Save Melania" and "Trump 2024. On the opposite side of the parking lot, protesters brandished their own messages. "No more cages" and "Immigrants are human." Principal Davidson hurried up to them, slightly out of breath. "The local police are here. They're trying to establish a perimeter, but—" He gestured helplessly at the window. "It's getting intense out there. How are the children?" Melania asked, clutching her brown bag closer. Scared, Maria Sanchez answered, emerging from a nearby classroom. Especially my ESL students. Some of them, they remember the detention centers, the camps. Melania stopped walking. For a moment, her perfect posture faltered. I remember too, every face, every cry. Mrs. Trump. Agent Carson was getting closer. This is your final warning. Jenny watched as something shifted in Melania's expression. The last traces of the polished political wife vanished, replaced by raw determination. No, she said quietly. Then louder, turning to face the agent. Number, these are your final warnings. The world will know what happened, what is still happening. Bob Thompson appeared at the end of the hallway, his gym teacher authority radiating. We've got more company, news vans from every major network, and some government types in the parking lot. They don't look friendly. Sarah Martinez rushed up, her phone in hand. It's exploding on social media. Someone leaked that Melania has documents. The hashtag number Melania speaks is trending. Through the walls, they could hear the crowd growing louder. Chants from both sides clashed in the air. Tell the truth. Stand by Trump. Free the children. Fake news. Linda's voice crackled over the intercom. Attention all staff. Please implement shelter-in-place procedures. Keep all students away from windows and exterior doors. Jenny felt her teacher instincts kick in. We need to move the kids to the interior classrooms. Already on it, Maria nodded. The library can hold 3 classes, and the cafeteria. A loud crash from outside made everyone jump. Through the nearest window, they could see 2 protesters scuffling, signs forgotten on the ground. This is exactly what they want, Melania said, her voice tight with anger. Chaos, confusion, anything to distract from the truth. Agent Carson stepped closer, his hand moving subtly toward his jacket. Mrs. Trump. Those documents contain sensitive information. National security. National security? Melania's laugh was bitter. Is that what you call stealing children? Making them disappear into your system? 2 more agents appeared at the end of the hallway. Jenny noticed Bob and several other teachers moving instinctively closer to Melania, forming a protective circle. Principal Davidson's phone buzzed again. His face went pale as he read the message. The governor's office is calling. And the White House press secretary just released a statement. What does it say? Sarah asked. They're claiming Mrs. Trump is having a mental health crisis. That she's been under strain and needs help. Melania's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Of course. When a woman speaks truth, she must be crazy, yes? More crashes from outside. The chants were getting louder, angrier. Someone had started playing the national anthem on speakers, while others tried to drown it out with protest songs. We need to get the kids out, Jenny said firmly. This is getting too dangerous. Principal Davidson nodded. I'll coordinate with the bus drivers, if we can get them to the back entrance. No one is going anywhere, Agent Carson interrupted. This is now a federal matter. The school is on lockdown. The hell it is, Bob growled. These are our students. And this is my story, Melania added, stepping forward. My truth. Those children wrote to me, trusted me. I will not be silent anymore. Through the windows, they could see more protesters arriving. Signs were being used as weapons now. The police line was struggling to maintain order. Sarah's phone buzzed continuously. Social media is going crazy. People are driving in from other states. Everyone wants to know what documents she has. Mrs. Trump, Agent Carson's voice was steel now. Think about what you're doing. Think about the consequences. I think about consequences every night, Melania replied. When I remember their faces, their voices. When I read their letters again and again. She opened her bag slightly, revealing the stack of children's drawings. What do you think about at night, Agent Carson? The agent's face tightened. That's not fair. Fair? Maria stepped forward, her own accent matching Melania's in intensity. Was it fair what happened to Rosa? To Miguel? To thousands of others? The tension in the hallway was interrupted by a small voice. Miss Wilson? Everyone turned. Tommy Anderson stood in the doorway of a classroom, his eyes wide as he took in the scene. Tommy, honey, go back inside, Jenny said gently. But Miss Wilson, there are scary people outside. And Lucia is crying because she thinks they're going to take her away like they took her cousin. The words hit like a physical blow. Melania's hands tightened on her bag until her knuckles went white. "No one is taking anyone away," she said firmly. Then, to everyone's surprise, she walked over to Tommy and knelt down. "Designer dress be damned. Tell Lucia she is safe. Tell all your friends they are safe. The truth." She glanced at the documents in her bag. "The truth will protect them now." Agent Carson stepped forward. "Mrs. Trump." "Number." She stood, turning to face him. "You can threaten me, try to silence me, call me crazy. But you cannot stop this anymore." She looked around at the teachers, the hallway, the school that had become an unexpected battleground. These children deserve to know why their friends disappeared. Their parents deserve answers. America deserves the truth. A new sound cut through the chaos. Helicopters. News choppers circled overhead, their rotors adding to the cacophony outside. "It's time," Melania said quietly. "Time for what?" Jenny asked. "Time to stop hiding. Time to face them all." She squared her shoulders, clutching her bag of evidence. "Time to speak." Principal Davidson looked panicked. "The crowd out there, it's not safe." "It was never safe," Melania replied. "Not for the children in cages, not for their parents, not for anyone who tried to tell the truth." She started walking toward the main entrance. "Mrs. Trump," Agent Carson called out, "if you go out there with those documents, I cannot guarantee your safety." She turned back one last time, and Jenny saw something in her eyes she'd never seen in any photo or video. Pure, unfiltered determination. "My safety?" Melania's smile was fierce. "I stopped feeling safe the moment I saw the first child in a cage. The moment I read the first letter. The moment I understood what was really happening." She reached for the door. "Now, I choose to be brave instead of safe." The teachers of Lincoln Elementary watched as Melania Trump, former First Lady of the United States, walked toward the chaos outside. Her brown bag of truth clutched tightly in her hands. Through the windows they could see the crowd notice her. The chants grew louder. The cameras turned. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered. Jenny looked at her fellow teachers, then at Tommy's frightened face in the classroom doorway. She thought about Lucia, about Rosa and Miguel, about all the children who had written those letters. "We do what teachers do," she said firmly. "We protect our kids. And we teach them what courage looks like." One by one, the teachers of Lincoln Elementary followed Melania Trump toward the doors, forming a human chain of protection and witness. Behind them, Agent Carson spoke urgently into his radio. Above them, helicopters circled like metal birds. Before them, the crowd roared with anticipation. The story was about to break wide open. As they approached the main entrance, the sounds from outside became deafening. Jenny could feel the vibrations of the crowd through the floor. Principal Davidson rushed ahead to speak with the police officers stationed at the doors. "They're saying it's not safe," he reported back, wringing his hands. "The crowd, it's getting violent." Through the glass doors, they could see people pushing against the police barriers. Signs clashed like swords. Someone had a megaphone, trying to lead a chant that was drowned out by opposing shouts. "Look," Sarah pointed. More black SUVs were pulling up. Men in suits poured out, their earpieces glinting in the sun. "More DHS?" Jenny asked. "No," Melania answered quietly. "Those are FBI. And there." She nodded toward another vehicle. "CIA. Everyone wants their secrets kept." Bob Thompson moved closer to Melania. "You know they'll try to discredit you. Say you're confused, manipulated, unstable." "They've been saying that for years," Melania replied, a hint of amusement in her voice. "Every time I tried to speak out, every time I showed the smallest disagreement." She straightened her spine. "But now they will learn. I am not just a pretty face. Not just an immigrant who got lucky. Not just someone's wife." Maria returned from checking on her students. "The children are scared, but safe. We've moved them all to interior rooms. No windows." "Good." Melania nodded. "They should not see this. They have seen too much already." She opened her bag one last time, touching the letters inside as if drawing strength from them. Agent Carson appeared beside them, his face tight with stress. "Mrs. Trump, please. Think about what you're doing. These documents, they could destabilize entire departments. People's careers, their lives. Their lives? Melania turned on him, her accent thick with fury. What about the lives of children who still wake up screaming, parents who still don't know where their babies are? What about their lives? The agent stepped back, startled by her intensity. Through the doors, they could see news cameras turning toward the entrance. Reporters were positioning themselves, sensing something was about to happen. "Mrs. Trump!" Linda called out, hurrying down the hallway. "You should see this." She held up her phone. On the screen, a news ticker ran across the bottom. Breaking. Former First Lady Melania Trump allegedly has evidence of systematic child separation cover-up. "They're already spinning it," Sarah noticed, reading over Linda's shoulder. "Look at the responses. Some are calling you a hero, others a traitor." "I am neither," Melania said firmly. "I am just someone who can no longer live with silence." Suddenly, a new chant started outside. Unlike the angry shouts before, this one was different. Clearer. Unified. "Let her speak! Let her speak! Let her speak!" Jenny moved to the door, looking out at the crowd. Something had shifted. The opposing sides were still there, still divided, but a new energy was building. "They're ready," she said softly. Melania took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "No," she corrected. "I'm ready." Principal Davidson made one last attempt. "The school board will have my head for this. The publicity, the disruption." "Frank," Bob interrupted, "sometimes teaching means showing kids what standing up looks like." Maria nodded. "Sometimes the most important lessons aren't in any curriculum." Agent Carson's radio crackled. "Subject is approaching the exit. All units prepare to." But Melania was already moving. The teachers of Lincoln Elementary moved with her, forming a protective circle. Jenny found herself directly beside the former First Lady as they reached the doors. "Are you afraid?" Jenny asked quietly. Melania's answer was interrupted by the sound of the doors unlocking. The roar of the crowd hit them like a physical wave. Cameras flashed. Voices rose. The world seemed to hold its breath. "Yes," Melania answered finally, gripping her bag of truth. "I am afraid, but—" She smiled, and for the first time all day, it reached her eyes. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do what's right anyway." The doors opened. And Melania Trump, surrounded by small-town teachers who had become unexpected guardians of truth, stepped out to face the storm. The moment Melania Trump stepped through the doors of Lincoln Elementary, the world seemed to pause. The shouting dimmed to a murmur, then to silence. Cameras whirred. Phones raised into the air like a forest of electronic trees. Jenny Wilson stood just behind Melania's right shoulder, close enough to hear her whispered prayer in Slovenian. The other teachers maintained their protective circle, facing the crowd with a determination born from years of handling playground disputes and cafeteria chaos. "Mrs. Trump!" The reporters' voices rose in unison. "Mrs. Trump, is it true? What documents? Are you having a mental? Does the former president?" Melania raised her hand, and somehow, impossibly, they fell quiet. For a long moment, she just stood there, scanning the crowd. Jenny watched as she took in every face, the angry protesters, the passionate supporters, the confused onlookers. The news cameras pressed closer, their red lights blinking like artificial stars. "You all think you know me," Melania began, her accent stronger than it had been in years of public speeches. "The model, the immigrant, the First Lady." She paused, clutching her brown bag. "The silent one." The crowd stirred. Someone shouted, "We love you, Melania." From another direction, "Traitor." "Perhaps I am both," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "Perhaps we all are, both loved and hated, both strong and weak, both right and wrong." She reached into her bag, pulling out the first letter. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. "This is from Maria Garcia, age 7. She held it up so the cameras could see. She wrote to me from a detention center in Texas," she asked. Melania's voice caught. She asked if her mother had stopped loving her, because why else would they be separated? A gasp rippled through the crowd. Someone started to shout something about border security, but was quickly shushed by those around them. "This one," Melania pulled out another letter, "is from David Chen, age 5. He drew a picture of his family, with bars between them. He wrote, "Please tell them I'll be good. I promise I'll be good." Sarah Martinez stepped forward, her teacher's voice carrying over the crowd. "We have children like Maria and David in our school, right now, still traumatized, still afraid." "They're illegal," someone in the crowd started. "They're children." Melania's voice cracked like thunder. "Children who committed no crime except being born on the wrong side of a line on a map. Children who trusted us, trusted America, to be better than this." She pulled out more papers, official documents this time. "You want proof? Here, memos, emails, orders, names of every official who knew what was happening and chose to stay silent, like I did." Her last words were heavy with self-recrimination. Agent Carson pushed forward. "Mrs. Trump, those documents are classified." "Yes," she cut him off. "Because the truth is classified. The pain is classified. The guilt is classified." She turned back to the crowd, but not anymore. Jenny noticed something changing in the crowd. The angry faces were softening. The raised signs were lowering. Even the most ardent protesters seemed caught in the raw honesty of the moment. "I am not here to take sides," Melania continued. "I am not here to accuse. I am here because." She reached into her bag one last time, pulling out a child's drawing. "Because of Anna." She held up the picture, a crayon drawing of a smiling girl holding hands with a tall figure in a blue dress. "Anna drew this in detention. She saw me on television and thought I could help. She was 6 years old. She believed in me." Melania's voice broke. "I failed her. I failed all of them. But not anymore." A woman in the crowd suddenly spoke up, not shouting, just talking. "My cousin's children were separated at the border. We still don't know." "I know," Melania nodded. "I have the records, all of them, where every child was sent, where they are now, who gave the orders, who followed them, who stayed silent." The crowd surged forward, but not in anger. Parents reached out their hands. Phones recorded every word. The world was watching. "You want to call me crazy?" Melania's voice rose. "Call me unstable? Look at these." She held up more letters. "Look at their words, their drawings, their pain. Tell me what's crazier, speaking the truth or staying silent while children suffer?" Maria Sanchez stepped forward again. "Mrs. Trump, my students, they're watching from inside. They can see you through the windows. They want to know." Melania turned toward the school building. Tiny faces pressed against classroom windows, despite the teacher's attempts to keep them away. She smiled, not her camera-ready smile, but something real and broken and healing all at once. "To all the children," she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet parking lot, "I am sorry. Sorry I didn't speak sooner. Sorry I didn't fight harder. But I promise you this, your stories will be heard. Your pain will be acknowledged. The truth will come out." A chant started, different from before. "Tell the truth. Tell the truth." But this time, it wasn't angry. It wasn't divided between supporters and protesters. It was unified, human, real. Bob Thompson's gruff voice carried from behind her. "You've started something here, something big." "No." Melania shook her head. "They started it. Every child who wrote to me. Every parent who still searches. Every person who chose truth over comfort." She squared her shoulders. "I'm just finally catching up to their courage." The next hour passed in a blur. Melania read more letters, shared more documents, answered questions not with political polish but with raw honesty. The crowd grew larger but calmer. Enemies found common ground in shared humanity. As the sun began to set over Lincoln Elementary, Jenny watched something extraordinary unfold. Parents who had been shouting at each other were exchanging phone numbers, promising to help find information about separated families. Protesters and supporters worked together to clean up the signs and debris from earlier chaos. "Miss Wilson?" Tommy Anderson's voice piped up behind her. Somehow he'd slipped out to the parking lot. "Is it over?" Jenny looked at Melania Trump, still surrounded by cameras but now sharing quiet words with Maria's ESL students who'd been brave enough to come outside. The former First Lady knelt down to their level, letting them touch the letters, answering their questions in gentle Spanish. "No, honey," Jenny replied, watching history unfold in a school parking lot. It's just beginning. Later that evening, as the news vans finally began to leave and the crowd dispersed, Jenny found a note on her desk. In elegant handwriting, it read, "Thank you for showing me that the best lessons are taught not through silence, but through courage. Today, your school taught America something about truth and humanity. Never stop teaching. Melania." The brown bag sat empty on her desk, its contents now spread across every major news network, its truth too big to contain anymore. Outside, the sun set on a different America than had risen that morning. An America that had been reminded, in a small-town school parking lot, that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest voices. And in classrooms across Lincoln Elementary, teachers began preparing for tomorrow's lessons, knowing that today they had taught and learned something that would never be found in any textbook. The parking lot had nearly emptied when Jenny noticed a small group still gathered near the main entrance. A woman in a MAGA hat was sitting on the steps, crying softly, while a former protester held her hand. "My grandson," the woman was saying. "They took him 2 years ago, said it was just temporary, but we never." "We'll find him," the protester promised, already typing on her phone. "Mrs. Trump gave us the documents, the records. We'll find him." Principal Davidson emerged from his office, looking exhausted but somehow younger, as if the weight of pretense had lifted from his shoulders. "The school board's been calling non-stop," he announced to the remaining teachers, "along with every news outlet in the country. And," he managed a weak smile, "3 different publishers wanting book rights to our story." "What did you tell them?" Sarah asked. "That some stories belong to everyone." He looked around at his staff, no longer just teachers, but witnesses to history. "And that our only priority right now is our students." Maria appeared from the ESL classroom, where she'd been comforting worried parents. "You should see social media," she said, holding up her phone. "The hashtag number Melania's letters is trending worldwide. People are sharing their own stories. It's like a dam breaking." Bob Thompson cleared his throat gruffly. "Got a call from my brother at Border Patrol. Says there's already talk of investigations starting, internal reviews, people coming forward." Jenny watched as the last news van pulled away, its lights cutting through the gathering dusk. Agent Carson and his DHS colleagues had disappeared hours ago, their threats of classification and national security swept away by the tide of truth. "Miss Wilson?" She turned to find Lucia, one of Maria's ESL students, standing shyly by the door. "Yes, sweetie. Do you think?" The girl hesitated, then gathered her courage. "Do you think they'll find my cousin now, like Mrs. Trump promised?" Jenny knelt down to her level, remembering the letters, the records, the careful documentation that Melania had preserved. "Yes, Lucia, I think they will." A commotion at the front desk drew their attention. Linda was arguing with a delivery person carrying an enormous bouquet of flowers. "I don't care if they're from the president himself. School policy says no unauthorized." She stopped as she read the card, her eyes widening. "What is it?" Sarah asked. Linda read aloud. "To the true teachers of America, thank you for showing me that the most important lessons are about humanity. These flowers are from my own garden. Each one represents a child we will bring home. This is just the beginning, Melania." As if on cue, phones around the room began buzzing with breaking news alerts. Jenny read hers with growing amazement. "Breaking. Congressional hearings announced. Former officials come forward. Records to be unsealed. Immigration advocacy groups report flood of new information." "It really is just the beginning, isn't it?" Sarah whispered. Outside, the sun had fully set on Lincoln Elementary. The parking lot where history had shifted bore only subtle signs of the day's events. A few trampled signs, some scattered pamphlets, footprints in the grass. But inside, the building hummed with something new. Hope, maybe, or truth, or just the simple power of voices finally being heard. Jenny gathered her things, including the note from Melania, which she carefully tucked into her lesson plan book. Tomorrow, her students would have questions. They'd want to understand what happened, what changed, what it all meant. And she would tell them the truth, that sometimes the biggest changes start in the smallest places. That courage isn't about being fearless, but about being honest. That every voice matters, every story counts, and every child deserves to be heard. As she turned off her classroom lights, Jenny paused at the window, Somewhere out there, Melania Trump was probably facing press conferences, official inquiries, the full weight of a system that preferred silence to truth. But here, in this small-town school, something extraordinary had already taken root. It wasn't just about politics or policies anymore. It was about humanity, about voices, about truth. And that, Jenny knew, was the greatest lesson of all.